Hello and welcome. In this lesson, we are going to review step 2, which is planning the implementation. The goal here is to identify and document all the areas of training implementation. And our output is going to be a detailed implementation plan that outlines all the requirements needed to implement a successful training program. So again, the main focus here is of the planning implementation is to complete the implementation plan template. You can find that template in the template section of this course. So some of the key inputs is going to be the project charter. We have the key stakeholder list, the requirements document, training plan, and the approved needs assessment. So all of those areas or documents will serve as an input here. They should be very fresh and familiar in your mind. We just went through the pre-work stage, which is where you will find some of those documents in addition to step 1, which you'll find the training plan and the needs assessment as outputs in that area. Implementation plan template section. So these are some of the key areas of the template that we'll be going through. So we're looking at the document overview, the needs assessment, the approach, roles and responsibilities, infrastructure, materials and curriculum, roadmap, and the evaluation. So again, this document is going to serve as your source of truth or your source to kind of guide all the decisions and the actions that will take place as you're going through the program implementation. At this point, you can either open the implementation plan template to follow through or follow along as we're going through each of the sections. I just want to remind you that we do have the template available to you for download in the template section of this course. So our first section is going to be the document overview, and the document overview provides some basic details around the contents of the actual plan itself. So we're looking at things like purpose, the audience, objectives, scope, assumptions, and then dependencies. The next section is going to be the needs assessment. And at this point, the needs assessment has been completed as part of step 1. You can insert the needs assessment and approved training plan into the appendix of the implementation plan as evidence or so that you can follow along, and it serves as a guide. So all those documents that you completed, you can insert into the appendix. And then reserve the space in the needs assessment section of the plan to describe how it's used. So things like the training plan needs assessment, it identifies the gaps in knowledge, skills, or abilities of impacted stakeholders compared to levels required to support and sustain changes implemented. And then you again insert the needs assessment tracker, the actual needs assessment, and an approved training plan into the appendix for reference. Training approach. So some examples of training approach would be blended, which would be a combination of instructor-led job aids, e-learnings, or online training. You could do online, which would be a presentation that is made available via your learning management system or some other online distribution method. So you can post maybe a video um, of your training to, YouTube and make that available to your staff. Or you can actually have, they have software where you would be able to develop web-based training, and you could use that as a method of development. And then lastly, another example would be virtual, and that could be instructor-led that is live and made available via a virtual meeting tools like Zoom or GoToMeeting. So those are just a couple examples of the training approach and types of training that you would make available. Training roles and responsibilities. In the roles and responsibilities section of the implementation plan, you will profile the key roles that will be part of the training team. So this is how you would introduce your team as part of the project and what those different roles would be. Individuals may have more than one role, so be sure to let the role guide the entry into this document. So even if their team member has more than one role, they would show up multiple times in this section. So here you see we have the training manager, and these two roles could be served by maybe the same person. In a smaller implementation, that can sometimes happen. But ideally, you would want your training manager and actual trainer to, have different titles and be different people, if you will. Training infrastructure. The infrastructure takes into consideration the systems that will be required for training. So as an example, the facility points to the physical location of the training. The systems environments will include the areas where training can take place for a particular system. So there may be a production and a training environment that you would need in order to separate the actual data from your test or training data. You will want to request and document the access that is going to be made available to the training team, and then also to your trainees that are going through training. Lastly, you'll want to document the learning management system that will be used to disseminate training and track training activities. So if you have an LMS or a homegrown, way of tracking and making training available, you'll want to document that into this section. The training materials and curriculum is where you are going to make a list of the curriculum that needs to be developed or the materials that need to be developed. Use the training plan created in step 1 to determine the primary topic, or in this case, it would be the module name. There may be multiple instances of material that are developed for one particular module or topic. The point of the materials and curriculum list is to paint the most granular picture of the development that is required for the project. Training roadmap. So the roadmap is the schedule in summary. It's going to be how you're going to get to the end. So it's going to include your development. So you can actually begin with your pre-work phase. You can start with your needs assessment, start, end for that. And you would just then go into each of the different steps and identify the timeline for each of those activities. The output would be a milestone chart. Training evaluation. So if this is going to be broken up into two sections, we have evaluation for students. Use a section of the plan to define the approach for gathering evaluation data. There are two major areas again to collect that would be from the student and from the overall perspective of program effectiveness. Successful companies measure outcomes to make sure they continue to get the biggest return. And when things go awry, typically training is not at fault, but brought up, and you always want to be able to justify the work that is being done to protect your team and protect the work that is being done from a team perspective. These are typically called corresponding behaviors. So you'll look to measure on the job activities to determine if the employee actually learned the information and they're able to apply it. This will be, that way there will be no surprises for anyone who's involved. So the other area, some of the examples to evaluate student data include the outcome of competency tests, feedback from trainees on confidence level at the end of each module, feedback from trainers on training problems or individuals who have experienced learning difficulties, and to support the evaluation process, trainees will be provided the survey link to complete an evaluation survey. This is to measure the reaction the trainees have post-training. So the other area we talked about a little bit is going to be the outcomes, and you'll want to use something similar to this document, which would be an evaluations metrics template. Basically, we're looking at measurable goals. And so we have the metric, which is measurable. We can quickly see or do through some analysis see that 90% of field assessments were accurate. And so we identify that as a line item in our metrics in a way that, on a monthly basis, we're going to look at the accuracy of field assessments just to be sure that we are meeting this metric here. Another example would be a little bit more detail about that example is that employees are required to go into the field and collect information, and they may be held to a quality standard that is measurable through reporting. Let's say that all employees should ask a specific question while out in the field, and every time the employee does not ask the specific question, that would count as a negative quality mark. In the monthly report, that data is pulled in and a percentage is given. And when that percentage falls under 90% for those that are newly added in the field, this points to a potential training issue. The report can be used as a trigger to identify a possible issue at training. Now, while the occurrence of new staff not documenting properly in the field can point to a number of areas, this may be a point at which the training team can address the issue. An important characteristic of metric is that it is clear and measurable. So that definitely gives some insight into whether it's an issue, and then you can be prompted as from a training or a team perspective, whether you want to go back to that business unit and share what approaches or what you have as a method to address the issue or the area where they're falling under the expected measurement. Please check the resources for this section to access all the great templates that are available to help you through the implementation process. So some of the templates that are included in that area and as well as this document would be the content review template, you have the evaluation metrics, which we've mentioned, implementation plan, LMS needs, and then the needs assessment. Let's move on to the next lesson.